Can tokens get you suspended in Yu-Gi-Oh? Is it really the token or is it something else? That's what we're going to break down in today's video. Hey guys, it's Tombox, and today's video will serve as a reminder that Konami isn't joking around when it comes to misrepresenting the game state, poor influential behavior, and most importantly, intent. And intent is the key word of today's video. Before we go into the breakdown, I kindly ask you guys to please hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button, ding that notification bell. It'll only take you guys a couple of seconds, and it'll really help out this channel, and I really appreciate that. And you know what? Let's begin with the breakdown. Recently, players have been discussing a lot about a certain kind of penalty and shining attention towards influences on outside game elements, tokens, and misrepresenting game state. I'm going to assume that you guys know what situation I am talking about. If not, you guys can leave it down in the comment section. The action in question, to give you guys a little more context, is to place a token face-up in view of your opponent. For this example, the token's graphic is apparently a Sword Soul Moye, alright? And for this example, we removed the possibility that this was an accident. And this token was intended for the opponent to see, to mislead or mind game them into thinking that the owner of the token is playing Sword Soul. Now, the owner of the token later admitted that the intention of the token was to shift the opponent's thinking towards that direction. Now, is this something that can be penalized? Is there any actual damage to the game? If so, does that mean I can't play like a Nibiru token, Sky Striker token, because it would mislead my opponent? And are mind games not allowed? What about sleeves? What about mats? And why are illegal plays not penalized as cheating? These are a lot of the questions that kind of flew about, so you know what? We can try to tackle all of this in a bit. This is something that's been covered in 2016, alright? And I'm going to bring up that old case of 2016. So first of all, using elements of the game to intentionally mislead your opponent is not allowed and is considered as cheating under the policy document. And I get that your definition of cheating might not match the definition of the policy, but if we had to choose between our definition versus the policy definition, it's most likely that's going to be the policy definition that is going to stand and not our own interpretation. This is something that also has been reiterated by Julia Hedberg back in 2016 during the release of the Emperor of Darkness structure deck, aka the Domain Monarch structure deck. With Aether and Erebus, people did not want to telegraph immediately of what deck they're playing simply by not having an extra deck. So what they did was they decided to put 15 tokens in the spot where their extra deck was going to be and hope that it was going to mislead their opponent thinking that they're not playing Monarchs. However, that completely was shut down by Julia and told us to review certain materials in the policy document and the penalty document, and even to this day it lives in our document here. So I'm going to read that part right now of why it's really hard to dispute what happened in our current scenario. Misrepresenting the game state. So the two key points I want to focus on are point number 4 and point number 5 on this list. Duelists may not make false statements about the game or gameplay, even about information that is considered private knowledge. Duelists may not place any game element in a way that would intentionally mislead their opponent or tournament official, or conceal elements' presence from the opponent or the tournament official's view. So anything listed above is misrepresenting the game state and is considered as unsporting conduct, cheating, and that's the infraction that you're going to be receiving. Oh, come on, Tombox. It was just a Sword Soul token. How much damage was done anyway? So I'm going to try to answer this in like two directions. The first direction is the one that we cannot escape. It's going to be directly related to policy stuff. It's just what it is. And the second one is going to be, let's try to entertain the idea of trying to find some damage. Okay, so first of all, the policy related stuff, there's no escaping it. The moment you signed into play any sort of these sanctioned events, you know, hey, you have to write in your game ID and then you have to agree to the terms of the tournament policy. Yeah, there's no escaping it. Whether you disagree with it, you still signed it and therefore you're kind of binded to it. All right, so that part, there's no real escape. The second part is this. And I think this still does affect the integrity of the game overall before the game even started. I know there's a little bit of a gray area in here as well. So I'm going to give you the example of, say there's a match between two players, and when the match is about to start, someone whispers into your ear like, oh, I heard that your opponent's playing Mystic Mine. However, the opponent's definitely not playing Mystic Mine. In fact, that's their opponent's friend, for instance, and is trying to mislead you into thinking they're playing Mystic Mine. So once you build your board, you may be influenced on how you make your decision. Would you allow or negate certain cards? And when you build your board, how far are you willing to commit into the board so you would have a ton of monsters? All of these things definitely impacted the game. I mean, if I know my opponent's playing Mystic Mine, I'm going to make sure that I'm able to clear that Mystic Mine, or even if I can't clear it, I won't have too many monsters, so even if they want to go for the kill, they'll have to re-enable my effects. But maybe that's ultimately what they wanted. So this becomes a bit of a gray area there. So did it influence your decision? If even the slightest decision was influenced, then the whole game integrity kind of got a little botched. Like maybe you would have full comboed and dunked on your opponent, but you didn't. And that's what I'm trying to say. For the Sword Soul example, if your deck is not impacted by, say, cards like Token Collector, and you know the trend was to main deck Token Collector to handle a lot of these token-based decks, whether it be the Brave token, whether it be Sword Soul token, people are main decking Token Collector, and if they have some way, say, using a Shooting Riser to dump that Token Collector into the graveyard versus, say, dumping a Fairy Tale Snow, they would have perhaps skewed the decision into a less effective card. Or say the owner of the token instantly scoops because the hand was dead, there was no hand trap, just somehow bricked in that particular case. They could influence siding decisions, and they could be putting in 3 completely dead cards based on information that was basically not even part of the game, which would have been a very drastic move to give someone 3 dead cards. And deck building is very key when it comes to anything related to competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! And the gray area is that one side can't prove that it did happen, and the other side can't prove that it didn't happen. So to remove the entirety of this whole gray area, you kind of fall back to the policy document. Does that mean that I can't use a Sky Striker token, Nib token, Mecha Phantom Beast token simply because I'm not playing those cards in my deck and it would mislead my opponent? The answer is you can still use those tokens. Yes, you can still use those tokens because, simply put, on those tokens it already mentions that they represent any token, and if it's summoned for another token it would match those particular stats. So the tokens themselves don't really represent anything, but what you should be mindful of is that you should not intentionally show it to your opponent, especially with the intent to make them think you're playing a certain deck, alright? Because technically tokens, they're not in your deck or your extra deck. They are summoned via an effect, and they only pop into the game as an element of the game when it is summoned. So to kind of avoid the suspicion, if you want to go 100% on avoiding this particular scenario, keep all your tokens face down so no one sees what kind of token that you run, or you can keep it in your deck box. I believe that may or may not be okay, but check with your judges on that one, because it technically doesn't need to be within public view, to be honest. And even if it was accidentally face up or shown to your opponent some way or form, it doesn't necessarily lead to an infraction. The key word here is that they need intent. There needs to be evidence of the intent, and it may not be the easiest thing to prove, but it's definitely not hard to the point where they can't point out the intention when it is there. It is pretty easy. And sometimes through your own pride, you decide to admit it yourself. And that's kind of what happened with the whole jokingly situation. I'm sorry, that's just kind of how it went down. So then what about like sleeves and mats? Say I use the Salamangreat sleeve and Salamangreat mat, but I don't use any salad cards at all. Can I get penalized for that? Like, isn't that the same thing? That is a really good question. It took me a while to kind of come up with this particular interpretation, which is, number one, sleeves and mats, they're a different class of accessory altogether. They're not really game elements that can be acted upon, and they serve a different primary role. Sleeves are there to keep your deck uniform and your cards protected, and for the mats, they're mainly there to protect your sleeves from taking too much wear and tear, and if you put zones on there, it's there to also help you maintain the game state. The graphics on the sleeves and mats are secondary to their function, as it mainly just shows an appreciation towards an archetype, and they do not really misrepresent the game state. They're not elements of the game after all, and shouldn't be mistaken as elements of the game. To go down the rabbit hole even further, can sleeves and mat misrepresent the game state? The answer is, yeah, technically there are cases, and one of such cases would be that your sleeves are blending into your mat and it's becoming difficult for your opponent to identify what is actually on your field. Say during the remote duel times, using a black mat and black sleeves, and then you have a really awkward reflection which blends everything together so your opponent can identify what's on your field. Yes, that becomes a problem. And say Another example would be like you have a specific zone design on each of your mats, and like each of the zone has the exact same character, but the exact same artwork is also used on your sleeve. Now you're kind of in a territory where your opponent cannot identify stuff on your board, and likely you would be asked to not use that mat. And if your intention was to hide your information like that, then that would be a case of misrepresenting the game state, because you're kind of hiding stuff from your opponent. And a token arguably being a game element that you can place onto the field. If you place an intent to mislead your opponent via the use of a token, then of course it definitely holds a different perspective. This is of course not like an official statement or anything, like this is just like my split hairs explanation. So I kind of want to know what you guys think about, mats and sleeves in general. I think mats and sleeves, they're just a different category, which is why I don't really care. And I don't think many people would feel misinterpreted by a mat or a sleeve, because those aren't things that you can act upon, and maybe that's where the mind game can exist. Oh, then why some illegal plays that happen during an event not penalized as cheating, and they still get their championship title? This is like a really hard question to answer. It doesn't really even relate to what I'm talking about here, but to what is known publicly, whatever that happens at an event basically stays at the event, especially when it comes to ruling. Whenever judges address a specific kind of ruling, they usually address it in a way that specifically starts with, for this event, X card is ruled a certain way. You can fill in the blanks yourself, but that's kind of how things work. And usually when it comes to card interaction based rulings, like especially when it's interaction based ruling, they typically fall under procedural error more than unsporting conduct. It's like a completely different scenario in most cases, but I can't speak for all cases. But in general, when someone forgot to activate something, when someone forgot to maintain a part of the game state, and if it's clearly accidental, usually it's gonna be falling under procedural error, and that definitely isn't related to unsporting conduct. And that's the best way I can answer this. Again, to close out, there's 3 points I want to make here. 1, tokens themselves will not get you banned. You can play whatever token that you want, because tokens can represent any other token within the game, regardless of artwork. However, you should not intentionally show what kind of tokens that you're playing. So if you want to take preventative measures, you can by simply leaving it in your deck box, or just putting it face down on the table without any chance of revealing it. And even if you accidentally revealed it, it's accidental. There was no intention involved. And number 2, UC cheating is a very serious infraction. It often involves 2 things. There is the intention to break the policy or break the rules, and of course there's the action that did so. Intention is very key here, and to give you a very basic example of intention differences, there's a big difference between slow play and stalling. Slow play is unintentional. It is implied to be unintentional, and likely it's a warning-based offense or warning-based penalty. But stalling, on the other hand, is cheating and has a much more severe consequence in comparison, because there's the intention to stall, to maybe abuse the rules. That's on the lines of stalling. You can read more about that within the policy document. And number 3, this is the big one. Any statement that can be interpreted as encouraging others to copy poor behavior or breaking against tournament policy is a big no-no, and potentially could lead to suspension. So be very careful about that. At least that's how I interpret it. And speaking of how I interpret it, this entire video is based off of my own interpretation and my own views. And of course, does not represent anything in official capacity, but it's just kind of there to kind of break it down for you guys, kind of join in on the conversation a little bit, and to share with you guys what's going on, and so that you guys don't fall under the same mistakes and things or ways that you can prevent yourself from being put in that situation yourself. All right, that's all I got for this video, guys. If you guys enjoyed this video, smash that thumbs up button. If you guys have something to say, leave it down in the comment section. I would love to hear what your thoughts are regarding the scenario. Well, that's all I got for this one. Until next time, don't forget to hold on to MST.TV. I'm going to be working on Ultimate Counter Guide as my next big video, so it's going to be a little bit before I post anything. I'll see you guys in the next one.